You ready to go?
I'm ready
Let's do
to kick us off.
let's do it. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Palazzolo. Welcome. I'm going to introduce Steve here in a second. Welcome to what we call the Executive Espresso Break. We promise that this is going to be the caffeinated edge for scaling success. If you are looking to scale your business, you have finally arrived at the right place at the right time. Let me slide over here, allow Steve to introduce himself briefly, because I always like to know who are these people and how can they possibly help me. So with that in mind, Steve, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Real excited to be here. Obviously, we are excited about how you scale your businesses. I've been doing it for 25 years in the technology world. I've been 5 times a head of sales and marketing with 2 exits and have grown businesses and scaled them to hundreds of millions of dollars in driving sales and revenue. And it's a really exciting time right now as we move into 2025 of what we can do and with the technology and the way the markets are moving. I think it's a really exciting time to get into and figure out how to get your business moving to the next level.
No, I agree. There's never been a better time to focus on your business, whether you're looking at scaling. And I, similar to Steve, have a background in corporate administration. I'm a Fortune 500 guy. I also come from the world of big consulting. I'm ex-Deloitte. And from an entrepreneurship, I've helped two companies exit along the entrepreneurial path. I like to say that in a scaling capacity, both Steve and I have either coached or consulted with organizations to take them from $10 million in top line revenue to over $1 billion. So again, welcome. My name's Sam Palazzolo. Let's get into our agenda today, Steve, because if that's who your hosts are, let's talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to talk about. I'll review on the right-hand side here briefly the agenda. I'll let Steve talk a little bit about what's on the left-hand side, the path to 2025 success. But Steve and I, when we were talking about how is it that we can drive home some business scaling success stories, maybe lay out a blueprint for you, we wanted to start out high at a 30,000 foot overview, and that's exactly where we're going to start. From there, we're going to attempt to drop down. We might call it treetop level. You might think of it as root level, but we're going to go 30,000 foot overview, exploring revenue strategies. We're going to do a deep dive into streamlined operations, and then we'll hit some focusing on team engagement, motivation, and then that treetop level, integrating the components, putting it all together, if you will. We'll try to keep some time at the end for some Q&A. If you've got them, though, feel free to utilize the chat arena so that way we can answer your questions as we go through. But Steve, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind talking a little bit about what's over here on the left-hand side, the path to success for 2025?
Sure. And as Sam said, use the for questions, please feel free to jump into the chat. We're monitoring that as we go forward. So what you see here is, and as we look at 2025, Sam and I sat down and kind of looked at what are the core elements that are going to drive growth and scale next year. And it comes down to what we think are the three foundational elements. The first is driving revenue strategy, right? Where are you going? How are you? Where's the revenue coming from? Who are you talking to? How are you going to get there, right? How are you going to engage that customer and make a move? The second is streamline operations, right? And you're seeing everything with AI is coming in here fast and hard. It is changing the way in which we do business in ways that we do not understand today, which is very exciting. But getting that efficiency moving, making sure you're not leaking deals out in the process, um, making sure that you're using AI technology to do things that are necessary, but letting you and your team focus on the relationship with the business. And then finally, it's engaging and motivating your team, right? How do you create high performing teams? How do you understand whether or not they are engaged? What is it you can do as a leader to make sure that A, you have the right people in the right positions and you're supporting them in every way you can to make sure they're doing their best jobs and having fun doing it. And so we're going to walk through those three elements as we go through the rest of the webinar.
Yeah, so three unique circles. The one thing that Steve and I both agree on is that if you work on any of them independently, you won't get the nucleus, which is the scaling your business. So, in other words, if you focus exclusively on revenue driving strategy, you may get some pop, but your business may not scale to its potential. Likewise, with the other two circles, streamlining operations and engaging and motivating the team. You really got to focus on each one of those three areas. In other words, how do you fish in multiple ponds simultaneously to scale your business? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. And speaking of talking about, Steve and I would be remiss if we didn't share with you. We're going to make you an offer at the end of this, and that is to have your very own 2025 Executive Espresso Strategy Session. We'll throw into the chat arena. We'll also follow up with you a couple of Calendly links where you can get a hold of either Steve or myself. So that way, in a 20-minute session, you'll be able to do the three following things. Identify your most pressing opportunities as you head into 2025. We'll discuss and discover the true cost associated with them. And then we'll share some 2025 scaling programs on how it is that you may plan of attack or blueprint or playbook or call it whatever you want to. This is the strategy for how it is that you, based on what you shared, can achieve success in scaling your business. Again, we're going to make you that offer. No obligation to participate, but it is one of those things where we'd be remiss if we weren't talking about scaling if we didn't offer you your own strategy session. So look forward to that at the end. Steve, let's start out at that 30,000 foot overview. This is going to be kind of a question answer type of a thing. The first question that I pose out there, Steve, is what do you see as the most significant drivers for business scaling in 2025, and how do they differ from the past? What do you see as the most significant drivers as people want to scale in 2025, and how do they differ from the past?
I think there's a bunch, but to me, there's two key ones. Number one is AI enhancements, right? The technology is moving so quickly and is making so much progress, particularly around how do you do lead scoring, right? How do you create an automated engagement sequence, right? Companies like our B2B, Clay, where they literally can grab people, come to your website, enhance the data, create a personalized email, send it out to them without you touching it at all. Right. And I think those type of AI enhancements to the sales process, to personalizing, understanding who is coming, who's looking, what we know. We know that every B2B buyer has done their homework, right? By the time they're reaching out and coming to you, they're 80% down the path. Right. So how do you get to them? How do you quickly respond? How do you do it in a personalized way that you're meeting their needs? And I think that the AI world is going to be huge, and it is going to change the way in which we are selling today. And I think the second one is the partner ecosystem revenue, particularly for smaller companies, those under 50 million, right? Your ability to sell with a partner is going to change the way in which you go to market, right? Big companies that are buying today, they're looking for total solutions, right? They don't have the time to sit and look at individual tools. And so figuring out who your key partners are, who you're complementary with, how do you go in and do a three-legged sales call, how you sit there and either white label, use API architecture to enable that integration, making it easier for the buyer to buy. And I think those two key things are going to drive next year. What about you, Sam?
It's interesting. I'm going to throw some things up here into the chat room. These are what we identified when we went out. We do a lot of research at my organization and doing these types of scaling initiatives. So we'll go out and we'll look to kind of identify and do research through the best of the best. What is the Wall Street Journal saying? Harvard Business Review, my ex-Deloittean brothers and sisters out there, McKinsey, Bain, so on and so forth. We have 7 primary sources. In the chat arena, I'm just throwing up there the 2024 challenges. You can take a look, you'll see everything from economic uncertainty and inflation, labor shortages and talent retention, all the way through leadership development and succession planning. That's what we identified for 2024. But when you take a look at the other here for 2025, what does that look like? Well, this is what we came up with. And it's fascinating from my perspective and for a lot of the leaders that we conduct executive briefings with. Because in 2025, leading the top of the challenges for us, Steve, is AI integration. We conducted a study and it was just validated by EY. 95% of the organizations out there believe that they should have an AI strategy, but only 25% do. I'm not certain what that means for the 5% who have we have no belief that there should be an AI strategy. They're kind of, maybe it's a fad, it'll blow over. I don't think so. But the interesting statistic within the statistic, 95 to 25, that basically means 70% of the organizations that are out there have no AI curbs on the road. I'm not saying AI is the key to business scaling, but to omit and to not pay attention to, and it certainly is an opportunity. Most of the organizations I work with, what used to take 6 weeks, now they can accomplish in 6 hours thanks to AI. So, but if you look at a couple of these other 2025 challenges that I threw into the chat arena, there's interesting challenges out there that leaders perceive they're going to face, like the organic growth moments of, let's take a look at, like on our 2025 success path over here on the left-hand side of the screen. These are incremental or real fine tuning of dials. But what if you need to do a major dial twist? We're talking non-organic, some potential M&A. So that's another big thing. We're always concerned about cybersecurity. We've seen that now in a couple of years back to back. But the big thing, and this as an accountant, it sings to my heart, and that is in 2025, leaders are looking at this from a capital and finance efficiency. So in other words, the last thing that's on this list I put in the chat arena, cash flow management and efficiency. This is something that our leaders are looking at and saying there's going to be some differences, but copy these things down in the chat arena, take a look at them, compare, contrast, great step down meeting, and just great meeting topics.
And Sam, that's a great list. Can you talk a little bit about the operational agility and flexibility and how that's going to be different in 2025?
Yeah, and it has to do with people, processes, and technology and how they play nice with each other. In other words, while every organization wants to claim that they're agile, the two tech startups that I led to exit, we were an agile organization, which basically meant that we adopted the methodology, daily scrums in the AM that were brief, major deep dives into what was working, not working, heavy KPI and metric collection, and then managing by those numbers. The thing that's always interesting, the flexibility component. How do you have and this is where, from a Deloitte background, how do you have a highly structured initiative, but be able to adopt and adapt towards those flexibility or organic moments that present themselves? It's a different gear. It's a different gear that leaders will need to have and use as they head into 2025.
Great.
Yeah, let's keep going here.
Yeah.
30,000 foot overview to dropping down a little bit further, exploring revenue strategy. Steve, the first question that I'll throw out to you, when considering a revenue drive strategy, what are the most common mistakes organizations make, and how can they pivot to a more sustainable growth model?
Well, I think that the single biggest mistake people are making these days is its overemphasis on new logo, right? Versus expansion. And it is so much easier and cheaper to get a current customer to buy more than to go buy to get a new customer. And so you see a lot of people focused 100% or 90% of their sales teams sitting on new logos and ignoring their current customers. That is a huge mistake. Your revenue should be somewhere around 60-40 expansion to new. You need the new, But man, if you're not at a 60-40 split, you are leaving all sorts of money on the table. All right. A lot of, what we're going to start seeing more and more of is the customer success, people working with their clients on a daily basis to make sure they're not only using the product the right way. It's shocking. One of my clients, they've had customers who've been using the software for 5 years and maybe use 10% of it. Right. And so we started a program where we go to long-term customers and literally do a training session with them. And it's amazing how little they understood about the full features of the product. And so getting with your customer, helping them solve problems, understanding how the software or service works, I think is a huge piece of it. And people make that mistake all the time.
Yeah, it's a great point. I've heard it referred to as if that is the sales funnel, tilting the funnel on its side, and then having an equal funnel on the opposite side. The initial funnel being the sales process until closed won. And then the funnel that is the reverse image is the customer success model. In other words, exactly what you're talking about, ensuring that satisfaction is there, maintaining retention levels that are desired, and most importantly, getting those clients and customers to advocate on your behalf. The percentage that you just shared with us, that the client who was only utilizing a certain percentage, our statistics are, and especially when we conduct tech stack analysis and do those types of autopsies or types of assessments, how good are we currently utilizing our tech stack? We find that the vast majority leverage about 25% of the potential. It's a matter of getting with the vendors that are out there so that way you can increase that. Imagine what your organization could do if you went from a 25% utilization threshold to 50%. Back to almost the AI utilization. This isn't even an AI adoption. It's just the tech stack that you have that you've been using for years. And how could you potentially double the productivity or efficiency therein? So great points. Let me hit on this second question here,
Yep.
Steve. With rapid changes in market dynamics, how should companies balance short-term revenue goals with long-term scalability? There seems to be in the leadership landscape a vision moment where we may have had long-term vision goals in mind, but the pressure to perform has caused a short-sightedness purposefully, right? If you want to
Yep.
show me how it is that behaviors are going to roll out in an organization, show me what the compensation plans look like. Is that what we're talking about here, Steve, or what's your answer
You
to
see, I mean,
rapid
this
changes?
is an age-old fight between I have to hit my quarterly number, I have to hit the number this month, versus, oh, I should actually, as the leader, be looking down 12 to 18 months to make sure I am not shortchanging myself and the team. And so this fight and tension between I got to hit my number this month and how do I set myself up to succeed next year is an age-old problem. The single biggest thing that people are missing is particularly the sales leaders and CEOs. What does that 12 to 18 month path look like? And it's one of those people say, "Oh yeah, no, I know, I've got it in my head," type of thing. It's one of those literally write it down with your management team, right? Of where do you want to be in 18 months? What does that product roadmap look like? What new markets are you moving to? What does your pricing look like? How do you continue to, what is that journey as you continue to go and make sure that you as the leader have one eye up to make sure you're heading in the right direction as you are trying to hit this month's number. The single biggest mistake people are doing is they're discounting the crap out of everything at the end of the quarter. And it is all that is doing is training your customers to wait to the end of the quarter so that they will buy. And so I had this with a client of mine who was literally they would literally just start discounting the last week of the quarter just to hit the number. And it's like, yeah, you're that is a downward path that you're going to continue on. And so what you try to do is if you're going to discount, be very disciplined about it. You're going to discount for something that's important to you, multi-year contract, for example. That's worth talking about. It is not worth discounting so that they're going to buy it this week versus next week. And so keeping that long term, how do I keep integrity in what I'm doing? How do I stay on that path, right? So that I'm not, caught by the siren song of I need to hit the quarterly quota.
Yeah, well said. Let's move on. Let's drive forward
Yep.
here. As we drop down one more layer from the second tier down from 30,000 foot, the deep dive into streamlined operations. How can businesses, Steve, identify areas of operational inefficiency, and what steps should they take to address these bottlenecks to scale effectively?
From a sales point of view, you got to be looking at the right KPIs. From an efficiency point of view, it's things like lead to opportunity time, right? When somebody raised their hand and said, "Hey, I'm interested," to either making it an opportunity or moving it into a nurture campaign. That should be less than 48 hours. If you're going beyond 48 hours, you are wildly inefficient, right? Looking within each of your segments and stages of your sales cycle, right? What is the length of each stage? What should it be? Where are you today? Looking, and this is something people miss all the time, is here's my process, here are my different stages. How many days am I sitting in this stage? How many days are we sitting in this stage? If you're seeing big roadblocks at certain stages, particularly around proposal, demo, negotiation, there's something wrong in the system and in the process.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, number of touches per deal is another great efficiency um, work. If you have a high touch, right? If you're 15, 20 times, you've got a problem. Conversion rate's the one of the most obvious. Everybody, you should be closing, rule of thumb is about 30%, right? Someone's going to be bigger, someone better. If you're wildly off of that, you're most likely not talking to the right people. And then finally, it's, where the deal's stalling, right? As you're looking at it, and you should be looking at your pipeline, you should be looking at the velocity of your pipeline every month. If you're seeing deals stall, you got to dig into where that's going.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested in your take on this. I'll kind of ask the question, then I'll answer from my perspective. But the second question that's here, Steve, in your experience, how does technology play a role in streamlining operations? And are there specific tools or frameworks you recommend for 2025? One of the client organizations that we worked with, and our baseline assessment, it's a quick readiness assessment. It takes 2 weeks to conduct. We look at 5 major pillars, 94 different parameters to collect what the current baseline state of business is. This is the current state, right? You can think of it from that perspective. And one of the things that we identified from that baseline assessment with one of our client organizations was that they seem to have a repetitious manual cycle of doing things. And so we, as a desired future state, put the goal out there of anytime we do something manually 3 times, we probably ought to look at automating it so that way things become more efficient, and then we move on to the next bottleneck. So it's a series of roadblocks or bottleneck elimination strategies. The great thing about business, you know this as well as I do, you're going to encounter roadblocks or bottlenecks. How you overcome them so that way you get on the other side or you eliminate that roadblock and move on to the next one, that's the key. But Steve, I'll let you answer. What role does technology play in all this?
Right. And you hit it on the head, which is I can't tell you the number of hours I have spent manually going through pipelines and deal flows and understanding exactly what's going on. If you're spending that much time, you need to automate. And if you look particularly now, Salesforce, HubSpot, um, they have done a great job in bringing that AI intelligence, if you will, to your pipeline. How long is the deal going in there? What does it look like? Where are the choke points, right? Where do you see deals falling off? Is it a consistent place? Is it by rep? Is it by type of deal? Is it by segment? Right? This stuff has all become automated in the last probably year, and it is a game changer in where you're spending your time and energy, right? Where now it's not, oh, I've got to sit down and literally spend days going back, or I have an entire team of analysts going back through the pipeline. That can be done like this with the tools that these guys are putting. And if you're not using, the AI tools, Clary is a great one, Gong's another one. If you're not putting these tools to work, you're wasting an enormous amount of time and you will never scale because you simply can't do it manually.
Yeah, the putting to work moment. This is
Oh,
the thing that we see time and time again in the leadership landscape. And we talked about the D word earlier, discount. I will call this
yes.
the A word, which is accountability. Accountability at the leadership position has never been lower than it is right here, right now. In other words, if we have associates that are working on our team that aren't hitting their numbers, they are not performing operationally at nowhere near an efficient level, and we have the metrics and KPIs to back it up, what are you as a leader doing about it? It's the A word, the accountability. I wish that there was a technology. Remember the good old days when if you wanted to quit smoking, you'd put a rubber band around your wrist and you'd snap it anytime you wanted a cigarette? Well, what if your Apple Watch sparked you like a cattle prod whenever one of your team members wasn't performing at their best level? The Apple Watch cattle prod, you heard it here, folks. We're going to patent it, and Apple may come out with it. But what if there was
The
that? So
shock,
that way
the
we could
shock
have
collar of
accountability.
sales, right?
Yeah, exactly. There might be, I don't know, some type of a legal moment there where it could be deemed inappropriate. But hey,
But we're
this is
we're
about
getting
business, right? This isn't
right. And
baseball.
what's interesting is we're getting there, right? People, there's apps like Amplitude, there's Rapid Miner. Tableau has really taken this to the next level where you can get real time and understand what's going on. And I want to just bring this point home, which is the single biggest mistake people are doing is throwing AI at a process without understanding the process first. Right. So we talking a lot about AI. We will continue to talk about it. It truly is changing the way in which we're selling. But unless you understand your process in detail, just randomly throwing tools at it or, clicking buttons in Salesforce, you are not going to be successful. And so I love as every sales leader loves the whole shock collar concept. We're getting there, but you want to be able to make sure you're using it in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. One of the organizations, we conducted one of those AI strategy architecture sessions. So that way we could put compliance, governance, those AI curves on the road for them, right? And one of the things that we discussed was, well, why can't we just have AI generate this? Let's just throw some questions at it, have it spit out. My response was that AI, and I don't care what tool you're utilizing, if it's Claude, if it's ChatGPT, throw your favorite one into the mix or in the chat room if you'd like. I'll share this much. AI is nothing more than an intern that it wants to please you. And it wants to please you in a millisecond response. What Steve was alluding to is that there's got to be some subject matter expertise and some governance
Yep.
overlooking what AI spits out just to see one, is that accurate? And two, is that appropriate for us? So don't make the mistake. A lot of organizational leaders think that they can have AI be the solution for the open book, everything, right? Steve, let's
Yeah.
move forward.
Great point.
Focusing on team engagement and motivation. The first question that we have down here is employee engagement is often cited as a critical factor in scaling. But what does true engagement look like, and how can leaders create an environment that motivates their team during periods of growth, which can be kind of chaotic? So, employee engagement, Steve.
Yeah, really important, right? Because you can have all the best process, the best technology, all of that good stuff going. If your team is not motivated, if they're not engaged, it's not going to make any difference, right? So you could key signs consistently high performance. they're hitting their quotas, they're hitting their KPIs, they're doing their pipeline management on a consistent month after month after month basis. Um, I think the second piece of this is proactive problem solving. They're engaged, right? And everybody's seen this. When you have team members that are coming to you and they're like, hey, we saw this problem, I got this option or that option. Like, great. Um, Low absenteeism and high participation, right? People are actually showing up at meetings. They're participating in the meetings. They have their, one of my pet peeves is people showing up and not having their video on, right? We're in a virtual world, right? They are on mute with their video off. And you're like, why are you even here? So having them participate, being engaged, and then I think finally for you as a sales leader, what I found is you're holding the reins loosely. When everything is working, right? You're not in micromanagement, you're not in crisis mode. You're doing what you can to support the team and guide them, and it's holding those reins loosely. So there's that feeling of everybody's moving, they know where they're going, they know what they're doing their work, we're making corrections as we move. But I think that's a key to understand that you are in the right place.
There's a great point. Two things that I'll kind of piggyback and carry on what it is that you're discussing here. If you really want to get employee engagement, I said it earlier, if you want me to show you what the behaviors are or what levers you're pulling to get folks to do certain activities and things, show me their comp plan. A thorough compensation plan review in alignment with your organizational goals and objectives, that's what will drive employee engagement. The trick, though, becomes how do we make it not a checkbox activity? In other words, what Steve was sharing, we want them to show up at a meeting, if it's live or virtual, if it's virtual with meetings on, and to be participative. There always should be as quantifiable as those metrics can be. There's got to be a quality component as well that's thrown into the mix regarding how is it their participation should be graded, right? Again, I'm trying to avoid the checkbox activity. Also, from a leadership landscape perspective, I did a lot of work. I teach at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm an adjunct faculty member there. I've taught at the higher ed level for 17 years. I've written 8 books on the topic of leadership. One of them was in partnership with Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes at Santa Clara University. If those names sound familiar, they wrote the Leadership Challenge over 30 years ago. That book, I think, is in its 15th edition, and it's in over 50 languages. Jim said something very instrumental to me when it comes to leaders, and that is the following. Leadership is not a popularity contest, but it also isn't an unpopularity contest either. In other words, the leader needs to be disciplined and firm enough to hand out discipline moments to their team members without getting carried away from the intoxication of leadership, which sometimes occur in younger leaders, where they perceive that my reality should be their reality. It's a mistake that I see far too often that they want to fire everybody. But two things again, that being the compensation plan and leadership, not as the popularity, but it's not an unpopularity contest either. That's what I would kind of round out the topic here on team engagement and motivation.
And
Let's move
I
on.
keep going. Let's
Or
go.
no, let's move on.
Yep.
Treetop level. We have arrived at treetop, Steve, integrating the components. How do we bring these things together? The question is, when these 3 areas, revenue strategy, streamlining operations, and team engagement, when they're all 3 in harmony, what are the tangible signs of success? And are there specific metrics or KPIs to watch for?
Yeah, the answer is yes. And I think this goes back to what everyone's the North Star, which is quota attainment. You are consistently achieving your quotas. And not only that, but everybody on the team is, right? Where you have, you see a lot of systems where, oh, I've got 10, only 2 of my 10 people are achieving quota. You're like, you've got a problem. It's either the people or the process and the systems. So when all this is working together, you've got high quota attainment and very consistent. You have happy customers, right? Happy customers, they will tell you because you can, customers are the first people to tell you what's wrong, but they're also renewing and they're buying more. So you're looking at your renewal rates, your churn rates, right? And your expansion rates. And then finally, you're looking at the team, right? Are you keeping your best guys and girls? Are they, are you churning people through? Are you losing people, right? Are you having people who want, recommending their friends and acquaintances for open positions? I think those three of I'm attaining my customers are happy, right? And I've got my people that are staying and recommending friends and family to the organization. I think that's what's telling you that everything's starting to work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, especially if you're a metric heavy organization where you can measure and put KPIs in strategic dashboards. And the dashboards can range based on what organizational level you're focused on. C-suite leaders, they should be looking at big picture.
Mhm.
Individual line leaders, they need to be drilled down a little tighter. And an individual team member, guess what? They need to have their own dashboard as well. And it's with specifics to them and the all important controllable items. You know, we always look at things from a real simplistic moment. Were they unwilling or unable to perform? If they were unable, that's on us. We either weren't equipping them with the right skill set, so maybe they needed to upskill. We weren't providing them with the right technology. We talked earlier about the low percent utilization of some tech stack items that are out there. How could we potentially double that? So on and so forth. Those are the types of things at the individual level that in control, we should be able to share with them. And the back to the A word, the accountability. What is it as a leader you're doing in those one-on-one weekly meetings with your associates so that way performance gets driven north? Those are the types of things that we look at. The second question here, I'll answer it after I ask it,
Right.
Steve, and then I'm interested in your perspective. But for businesses that may be struggling to get all three of these elements aligned, what initial steps or strategies would you recommend to set them on the path to 2025 success? I mentioned it earlier, our quick state 2 week readiness assessment, where we analyze the five pillars of business, over 94 different parameters. That's what we recommend to our client organizations to get that pinpoint accurate current state assessments. That way we identify if you're here and you want to go here, what is the path towards that? And the action plan, it essentially writes itself. It essentially writes itself. So that's one technique that we've leveraged over the years. Steve, any insight from your perspective?
Well, and that's a great way of doing it. I'm a big fan of crawl, walk, run. So it's you look at these kind of things, and you're looking at our diagram, and it's like, oh my God, there's literally 50 things I can be doing. 50, bottlenecks and process and all this. Start small. Start with one, pick one revenue stream to optimize. Look at your ICP. Just take a step back and sit down and look at your process. Literally write it down. I remain surprised every single time the companies I'm working with are like, oh, show me your process, your sales process. Oh, well, I'll walk you through it. No, no, do you have it written down? I do not. Literally, the first step would be to get that written down and look at it. And it is amazing. I had a boss who's big time, every time was saying, writing is thinking. And so writing it down brings out the pieces that you don't see, you can't see in your head, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is where everything's leaking out. Let's look at that. So again, start small, pick one area, get your process set up, and then start continuing to build on that. Because otherwise you will be overwhelmed and you'll get 50% of 10 things done versus 100% of five.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to sum it up. It's the how do you eat an elephant? If you
Yeah.
identify that, boy, this is going to be a big doing, a big undertaking. We eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And with strategic positioning and strategic eating, and you can identify how to go about doing that. I worked with a gentleman, he was legendary, and the organization I worked at, we did a lot of work with the Gallup
Mhm.
organization from that employee engagement. We did all of those types of upskilling of the leadership and team member skills. And one of the things that the gentleman that we worked with, he had this saying that is forever ingrained, burned into my memory. And he almost did it in a sing-songy like manner. He used to say, "A goal without a plan is just a dream. A goal without a plan is just a dream." I didn't appreciate it at the time. Sometimes when you're in your early 20s, you kind of hear things and you're like, that guy's weird. Or I don't know what that means. Or that's not my type of music. But I find that I keep on referring back to him and that song because a goal without a plan is just a dream. He's so right. He's so right. Because you've got to have that strategic direction in mind. But then, as you mentioned, Steve, you got to write it down.
Did we lose you? There we are.
Oh, got to write it down. All right. So let's bring it home, Steve. We said that we were going to make an offer. Take them what this offer consists of. What are we going to do with folks?
So what we want to do is we will sit down. We've walked through what we're doing here, where we think the plan and the approach to how do you scale in 2025. What Sam and I'd like to do is sit down with you for 20 minutes, a half hour, and walk you through, help you identify what are those opportunities on that long list of things to do. What is the most important that you should be focused on, right? Understand what the costs are associated with it, and then give you some of our templates and plans on how to get going in 2025. Again, it's all free. We're happy to sit down and just help you think through what you want to do and how you're going to get there in 2025.
Awesome. I'll put into the chat arena. Steve and I are going to piggyback on these types of
Yep.
sessions. While we promise that we're going to make every effort to be together for them, you may get one of us, you may get the other, depending on our availability. But this 20-minute session, it can really help architect. Well, we're not going to be able to identify the entire elephant. We'll at least be able to identify the trunk or the tail, depending on which end you want to start on. But we'll be able to flush out the most pressing opportunities, challenges, etc. One of the leaders that I just met with yesterday, he described it as this is our bazillion-dollar opportunity. The bazillion-dollar opportunity. They are staring down the barrel of this bazillion-dollar opportunity shotgun, proverbially and literally. And so then it's a matter of, okay, that's the bazillion-dollar opportunity. There's probably some real world costs associated with it, and it's not quite a bazillion dollars. But what's the reality of it if you do it? And then we'll share some different methodologies, techniques, etc. So that way, and it's no obligation whether you want to work with us or not. It's our pleasure to share with you what we think are some best practices taking place out there in business at large. So sign up for a strategy session. Let's get together. Let's connect. We're in that Q4 time period where not only is it budget season, but it's important to make certain you in 2025 achieve not only the altitude, but the clarity at altitude so you can, with crystal clarity, identify what it is you want to work on in 2025 and have a plan for achieving success. So that's my portion of today. Let me turn it over to you. Bring us home and shut us down, Steve.
Great. And so I think Sam is, and you reminded me, I was talking with a client yesterday, and they have a goal for 2025, and it's to double their growth this year. And I asked, okay, so what are you going to do to get there? And they said the same thing we're doing now. And you're like, okay, you heard that, right? And so they're like, oh, right. Okay. So as we talk about this and what I think a lot of people are looking now, I mean, 2025 is literally 45 days away. Most of them are going through their budget. They've got big goals for 2025. They need to, they're trying to figure out now, how do you get there and how do you do that? And Sam and I have worked at this. We've seen the pattern recognition. Give us 20 minutes. Let us help you get there, at least get you started. Do we have any questions from the audience?
This was great. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All
Sam,
right.
nice to meet you. I've known Steve for a long time.
Yeah, nice meeting you too.
Yes.
So, Steve, bottom
Appreciate
line is I'm interested and I think you can really help us.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
that is
balls in our court.
perfect. That's great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Sam, always a pleasure. 2025 is going to be it's actually a really exciting time uh, to be in business. The markets are moving. I think the freeze that we've seen, everyone's been very kind of hesitant. I think now that the election's over, I think people have a direction going forward. And it's really, we're starting to see a lot of people making phone calls. Things are starting to move up. 2025, to be successful, to really leverage all the opportunity out there, you're going to need a plan. And if we can be of help, we'd love to. And with that, Sam, we'll wrap it up. We'll be doing another one of these in a month from now. We'll send out that invitation. This recording will be available later today, and we'll send that to everybody who registered as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Sam,
Okay.
always a pleasure. And we'll wrap it up with that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.